Namaskar. Welcome you all to this session on risk assessment and analysis part 2. In fact, it is in continuation with the last session which focused on risk assessment, which is a primary action prior to analysis. Both assessment and analysis are very critical to disaster risk management, which form the basis for effective decision making in terms of mitigation, preparedness and response plan. Today, I will be focusing on risk analysis. Now, let us go to introduction to DRM analysis. What is the DRM analysis? DRM analysis involves breaking down the disaster risk into manageable components such as hazards, vulnerabilities and exposure. It depends the understanding and potential impacts, creating a roadmap for effective disaster response and mitigation. Core components of DRM analysis is to prioritize the most critical risks for timely interventions, to identify systematic weaknesses and high risk areas for tailored solutions, to guide decision makers to implement effective mitigational strategies. How it is significant in disaster management? It provides a data driven foundation for proactive disaster planning. Exposures resources are directed towards minimizing human, economic and environmental losses. Now, let us talk about the importance of vulnerability and exposure assessment. Vulnerability focuses on societal, structural and systematic weaknesses that amplify disaster impacts such as poverty, lack of education and insufficient healthcare. It assesses exposures, examines the proximity and susceptibility of populations, infrastructures and access to identified hazards. This includes determining high risk zones and the potential extent of damage. What significance it has in DRM? Vulnerability and exposure assessments allow for targeted risk mitigation, ensuring tailored strategies to protect lives and assets. Now, what are the components of vulnerability assessment? There are various components such as socio-economic conditions. Low income groups often lack the resources for effective disaster presentation and recovery. Factors such as unemployment, poor living conditions and inequality further exacerbate risk. Human and infrastructure gaps. Communities with limited access to healthcare facilities or substandard infrastructure face higher disaster impact, and that increases fatalities and slowing recovery. The third one is cultural and demographic factors. Vulnerability varies by community composition, including the language barriers, religious practices or age specific needs like those children and the elderly. Now, what are the components of exposure assessment? Population proximity to hazards. Densely populated areas in floodplains or earthquake zones regions are more exposed to potential disasters. Unregulated urban sprawl often worsens the situation. Critical infrastructure risks. Essential services like hospitals, power plants are particularly vulnerable and demand immediate attention. Economic dependencies. The placement of industries, farmlands or commercial hubs in disaster prone areas creates economic fragility during hazardous events. Now, let us come to social vulnerability index, that is called in short SVI. What is the SVI? It is a quantifiable, measurable, combining societal, economic and demographic factors to identify communities that are disproportionately at risk during disasters. It gives comprehensive risk insights. SVI provides actionable data to highlight communities needing immediate and long term interventions. It has a role in equity and inclusivity, helps policymakers design inclusive system, and that is required to address disparities in disaster response and preparedness. Purpose of social vulnerability indices. Targeted resource allocations. It identifies regions with higher social vulnerability, enabling efficient distribution of resources during crisis. Second one is enhanced preparedness. It facilitates tailored training, evacuation plans and community awareness programs for at-risk populations. The third one is strategic resilience building. It focuses on long-term strategies like reducing income inequality and improving healthcare accessibility to strengthen community resilience. Then what are the components of SVI, that is Social Vulnerability Index? The first one is economic indicators such as income levels, employment rates and financial access dictate a population's ability to prepare for or recover from disasters. Health and accessibility metrics such as chronic health conditions, disability prevalence and health care facilities proximity significantly impact the recovery rates. Next one is demographic vulnerabilities such as population with higher percentage of elderly people, children or illiterate citizens face distinct challenges during disasters. Next one is housing and infrastructure quality such as poorly constructed buildings in high risk zones are significant threats during earthquakes, floods or cyclones. What are the applications of Social Vulnerability Index SVI? First one is disaster preparedness. It prioritizes vulnerable areas for drills, awareness campaigns and infrastructure reinforcement. Next one is response distribution post disaster. It ensures timely aid to unserved population, reducing recovery time and suffering. Third one is policy development. It helps in shaping inclusive urban and rural development policies and plans that addresses structural inequalities, improving long term resilience. Now, let us talk about infrastructural vulnerability analysis. How we are doing the vulnerability analysis of the infrastructure? What does it address? It analyzes risk at critical infrastructure like transportation, healthcare facilities and utilities during disasters. It is ensuring service continuity. It focuses on preserving essential services during emergency to minimize societal disruption. It is guiding resilient investments. It prioritizes retrofitting and upgrading the infrastructure in the most at risk areas. Now, what are the components of infrastructure analysis? Number one is structural durability. It evaluates whether the buildings and bridges adhere to modern safety codes and withstand conditions of hazards like earthquakes or cyclones. Geographic and hazard risks. It maps infrastructure situated in flood prone areas, seismic or coastal regions to identify high exposure zones. And the third one is interconnected systems. It explores cascading failures such as power grid disruptions leading to water supply breakdowns, highlighting critical interdependencies. What are the tools for infrastructure vulnerability analysis? GIS and mapping software is the first tool. It provides a spatial analysis of infrastructure and hazard overlap, identifying zones requiring mitigation. Second one is remote sensing data. Real time imagery helps monitor infrastructure damages during disasters, aiding quicker recovery responses. Third one is simulation and modeling. It predicts infrastructure performance under various disaster scenarios, facilitating proactive interventions. Now, what is the risk evaluation in disaster risk management? Let us define first risk evaluation. It is a structural process to measure and compare risk against predefined thresholds such as acceptable financial losses or societal impacts. There are key objectives of risk evaluation. It guides decision makers in balancing risks with available resources, ensuring sustainable mitigation efforts. It plays the critical role by providing actionable insights for prioritizing risks, enhancing resource allocation and planning effectively. Now, next one is importance of risk prioritization. Let us talk about importance of risk prioritization. It focuses on high impact risks. It addresses severe threats with significant potential consequences such as earthquakes in densely populated cities. Optimize resource use. It directs limited funds and workforce toward the most pressing risks, ensuring maximum impact. Supports strategic planning. It helps align intervention with broader disaster management goals such as community safety or economic stability. Now, the next topic is quantitative risk assignment models. The first one is probability models. It implies data and algorithm to estimate the livelihood of specific disasters such as a 1% chance of a 100-year flood occurring annually. Second one is cost benefit analysis. It compares the cost of mitigational measures against potential disaster losses, ensuring economically sound decisions. The third one is Monte Carlo simulations. It generates multiple disaster scenarios and those are offering probabilistic insights into risks and their impacts. The next topic is the qualitative risk assessment methods. Number one is expert judgments and insights. It incorporates specialized knowledge for evaluating risk in absence of numerical data. Second is scenario based planning. It develops detailed disaster scenarios to examine potential vulnerabilities and response strategies. The third is community centric approaches. It utilizes local knowledge and experiences to provide a nuanced understanding of risk and resilience capabilities. Let us review risk matrix now. It visualizes risks. It combines likelihood and impact metrics into an intuitive grid for quick risk assessment. Next one is it categorizes risks. It uses low, medium and high levels to prioritize interventions. There are some practical utilities. It is effective for diverse applications from urban zoning to emergency response coordination. Then how to construct the risk matrix? First is to define the parameters. For a risk matrix, first we have to define the parameters. It sets clear scales for likelihood and impact based on historical data and expert assessments. Then risk is to be mapped. It plots identified risk on the matrix for every prioritization and resource allocation. Third is there is a visual clarity. Color coded zones simplify the identification of critical risks requiring immediate attention. Now, then let us discuss the benefit of risk matrices. It simplifies complex data. It transforms technical data into actionable insights for varied stakeholders. It enhances prioritization. It guides decision makers toward high priority risks for targeted intervention. It encourages collaboration. It creates a common framework for interdisciplinary disaster management teams. Then what are the challenges in using risk matrices? There is subjective bias. It relies heavily on judgments which may vary among stakeholders. Second is there is oversimplification of risk. It reduces complex risks to simplistic categories, potentially overlooking nuanced issues. And the third is dependence on data quality. It requires accurate, comprehensive data which may not be available at the time. Then let us discuss the role of risk ranking. There is systematic prioritization. It uses ranked list to ensure structured decision making, especially in resource scarce context. It supports long term planning. It guides infrastructure investments and policy shifts for enduring disaster resilience. It enables dynamic responses. It adjusts priorities as new data or risk factors emerge, maintaining relevance. Now, how to integrate and why to integrate risk matrices and the rankings? It ensures enhanced decision framework. It combines numerical precision with qualitative insights for comprehensive risk evaluation. It ensures community engagement. It brings stakeholders into decision making process, enriching outcomes with diverse perspectives. It helps in data validation. It cross checks findings for accuracy and contextual relevance. Now, let us discuss its relevance and its application in urban planning. Number 1 is risk informed zoning in urban area. It restricts high risk areas such as floodplains from commercial or residential development. Number 2, infrastructural safety enhancements. It ensures critical facilities like schools or hospitals meet disaster resistant standards. And the third is community livability. It aligns urban growth with sustainability and resilience principles. Now, let us discuss some real world scenarios which are the successful stories. Number 1 is the Bangladesh cyclone preparedness. There are multi-level shelters and early warning systems there saved many lives during cyclone Sidr. Japan's earthquake resilience measures, the advanced seismic codes, high level of standards drastically reduced casualties in recent earthquakes. And most important, Netherlands flood defenses, innovative water management including dikes, levees and canals protects against flooding. The entire Netherlands zone is safe against the flooding. Then what is the way forward for risk analysis in DRM? For adopting advanced technologies, it leverages artificial intelligence, Internet of Things and big data for real time hazard monitoring and predictive analytics. For promoting global collaborations, it shares data and best practices to enhance worldwide disaster resilience. For investing in capacity building, it equips local governments and communities with advanced DRM tools and training. With this, there is the end of discussion on the risk analysis. Let us now move to recapitulation. What has been covered today? We have covered DRM analysis, principles including vulnerability assessments, risk evaluation and ranking tools. Again, under tools and techniques, they highlighted social vulnerability index, risk matrix, GIS and qualitative and quantitative approaches, and then future directions. Under future directions, we have talked about proactive resilience planning, equitable resource allocation, technology driven solutions. With this, let me close the discussion today. Thank you very much. Meet you in the next session. Namaskar.